we were very eloquent in choosing our the name of our presentation, in that we called it "File Shares Suck." Um, and the thing is, they do. File shares are really, really horrific. Give me 1 second. Let me get that prezo up on screen. We should now see the HGI logo and my mouse moving.
Yep.
All right.
Looks
Always
good.
like to make sure of that before we move forward any further. And I'm going to go ahead and cut my video just to save on bandwidth, and we'll go ahead and get started. So we were talking about, obviously, we know we want to store documents electronically rather than in paper, because we really can't trap that information any more than sticking it on a sheet of paper or shoving that into a file cabinet or banker's box, and then hoping we know where it is at some point. That makes that really, really difficult. So we know we want to store it electronically. There's a lot of advantages to that. We can give ourselves the ability to have backup and replication, which is extraordinarily difficult in paper. We recoup floor space. When we get easier access to information, our customer satisfaction and our efficiency goes up. Our operational expenses typically go down. And that's all great. And we want to store stuff electronically more than just paper, but we can't just stop at saying electronically, because when we start to look at how do we store documents electronically, there's a lot of different options. So some of those options would be working with network or cloud file sharing platforms. Obviously, there's a ton going on in the Office 365 space, with different tools for different purposes there. And then we get into what we tend to lean towards more frequently is actually really truly getting into the space of intelligent information management. But before we get into intelligent information management, let's talk a little bit about your other options. First off, file shares. And if we all raise our hands, if we've done file shares, we're all going to raise our hands. Right. So, there's a few options there. Obviously, in the local world, the predominant thing you're going to see is the Windows file share, right? Every different organization has their different your letter here drive, which is a shared file system somewhere on a server, probably, that's mapped to a particular drive letter. Or they may be doing file share with another OS. There are other things than Windows out there, maybe NAS or SAN, any number of things that are doing those local file shares. But in general, they're all pretty basic. And we'll talk about that. And then obviously, in more recent history, we've gotten a lot of cloud offerings, and I don't have room on the screen to list them all. There's Box, there's Google Drive, there's Ignite, there's so many others. And I hope I'm not insulting anyone that I didn't list the one you may use. They're all out there. I just don't have space for them, but they all tend to follow a lot of the same rules. And so what we tend to see in those is that whichever platform you're using, whether local or cloud, it typically has the same problem. And that is, we are storing those documents based upon what a human chooses as far as where to store them and what to name them. And of course, we all in the technology space will tend to say, well, hey, I can come up with a great folder storage convention and naming convention, and it'll be organized and we'll be able to find stuff. And there's a few problems there. One, a lot of times our technology-based minds don't really work well with our users and what their needs are. Or even worse, we're all aware that if we have a human choosing or a human responsible for following a process that we have conceived, that process is going to fail because humans don't follow rules real well. So what we wind up with is what I tend to call the digital landfill. Okay. which means I don't name it the same way Keith would name it. He doesn't put it in the same folder Piper would put it. And we wind up with documents that are lost. We wind up with documents that are duplicated, triplicated, quadruplicated, if that's a word. And it's really difficult not only to find the information that we need, but which of those documents, which of those files is the actual real document from a business standpoint versus what is an out of date or duplicate that doesn't contain all the current information. Okay. On top of that, your file sharing platforms typically have little to no capabilities for workflow automation or retention management, and they're also really difficult to secure and audit access. Now, don't get me wrong, you're going to see these platforms say they do these things, and some may do better in certain areas than others. But for any of us who have, let's go back to the lowest common denominator, who's tried to set up granular security on Windows folders? It is painful. What about Audit Trail or various other tools like that? It's really, really hard to deploy. There are functions to do it, but the feasibility becomes really a non-starter. So what other choices then do we have? Well, one of the most popular that we see is from our friends in Redmond, is Office 360. And so we're going to see tools in O365 like OneDrive and SharePoint, Teams, Outlook. Obviously, Teams and Outlook are lesser players in the space of storing information. For example, Teams has some capability to do workflows and those sorts of things, but we tend to see that people aren't really geared up to store their information in Teams, and there's reasons why. OneDrive is great for backing up your local storage and giving you accessibility to what's on your desktop or laptop on other devices or in other areas, but it's difficult to share files and share access to information to other folks within the organization. We all, I think, probably agree that we really don't want our users, even though Outlook still tends to be used tremendously for storing documents and information, we really don't want them doing that. And it's not a good choice. And that leaves us with SharePoint. And SharePoint really is used and can be used well for shared storage.